Hello guys, today I'm going to be talking about print function and we're going to understand how to use print function and different specifiers and why do we use specifiers. So now print function, we know that print function, it gives us ability to display whatever we want to display. It can actually be a variable or just a letter or a word or a statement. So we use this print function to display anything. So this print function needs specifier. So every time we need to understand that computer does not understand anything. So we need to be precise, especially when working with C programming. We need to take compiler everything we need to do. So if you declare a variable and this variable is a character, you need to take compiler because these are not done automatically. That's why C language is very close to hardware, is very close to the computer, and that's why we call it middle level language, because you have to specify, and the work of the specifiers is to specify. So it's just as simple as that. We need to specify the type of data we're trying to display. So if you're trying to display a character, you need to specify. If you're trying to display an integer, you need to specify. If you're trying to display a float, and in my last video I talked about float means decimal numbers. So if you're trying to display decimal number, then you need to specify, and that's why we have different specifier. So I'm going to write in different specifier that we actually have. So here, if we're actually trying to display an integer variable, we use this, and if you're trying to display floats, we use this for float, and if it is a character, we use this for character, and if it is a string. And what I mean by strings actually means an array of character. So we have character like letters, and these letters form statement, and from what form statement is word. So we have word, then we have statement. So we call it strings because it's no longer one character. It's now a combination of several characters to form a word, which now form a sentence. So that's why we call it strings. So we're going to be talking about strings more in intermediate playlist, and please watch my intermediate playlist because we're going to be talking about functions more, and we're going to be talking about array and strings, and this is where we get into the real C programming. So how do we use print function? So I'm going to type one program now, and we're going to see, first of all, when writing your program, you need, from the structure of programming, we've talked about structure of programming, we need to use library. You include the library you're trying to, you know I talk about library, and I mentioned how to use them and why we need library, where I said stdio is just the library where we normally get the tools for print and scan function. So when you try to print and you try to scan, we normally use this library. So this is where we get the tools. This is where we get the tools. So from the word include means we're trying to, to tell compiler that we're going to be needing tools from stdio.h, and these are the tools that we're going to be using to print, our result. So print function is actually, is found in this library. So without this library, we can't print. Without this library, we can't print. We can't scan anything. So Now, after this, the next thing we need to do, we need to introduce our main function. So this is where compiler normally go to perform some task. So all of this, we're going to be doing this later on, why I'm using this double bracket, and then we have brace, which is curly bracket. I'm going to be talking about this in intermediate playlist. So now we need to declare our variable. So if our variable is an integer, we need to declare it with an integer, and let's say a equals to 20, then we always need to use semicolon at the end of every statement. And now I'm going to print. So now I'm going to use print function. So we need to write the our print function. So this is our print function. And then print function. Once you write printf, you open the bracket, you need to use double quotation. This double quotation means the beginning of what you want to display. It means the beginning. So now after this, I'm going to type whatever I want to display. Let's say I want to say hello, hello. Then I'm going to close it with another double quotation. So this quotation means the beginning and it means the end. So let's say, for example, you're trying to print something. Compiler is going to use this to know the beginning, and it's going to use this to know the end of what you're trying to display. So now I've told compiler that this is what I want to print, and it's going to start from here and it's going to end here. So it's going to display this. It's going to display this. So this is how we use print function. Then let's say, for example, you're trying to print a variable. So if you're trying to print a variable, then you need a placeholder, and that's where we use specifier. So let's say I want to print this variable a, then I'm going to use this. This is a placeholder. Then I'm going to check. We can actually see that a is an integer, so I'm going to use integer specifier, and I need to give the compiler the variable I'm trying to print. So this is the program, this is our program, and I'm trying to use this. This is actually a placeholder. This is where it's going to put this value. It's going to put here. So this means a placeholder. So if I'm trying to mix my word with a variable, then it's going to look here and it's going to get the value of a, which is 20. Then it's going to place the 20 here. So this is like a placeholder where compiler is going to place the value of the variable. So it's a placeholder. So if I'm trying to display integer variable, I need to use integer specifier, which is this. So then what if a is not an integer? If a is a character, let's say character, and each time you try to use a character, we use single quote for character. So let's say a is this, we use single quote for character. But when it's more than one character, we use double quote. We need to take note of this. I'm going to explain this again. So this, we use double quotes, we use double quotes if the character is more than one. That's when we use double quotes. So if it's just one character, we have to use single quote. So I'm going to be doing that when we start talking about strings. in intermediate playlist. So let's say this is a, and now a is no longer an integer, it's now a character. Then I need to use character specifier. So here has to be C. So I have to change here to C, which is character specifier. So what if A is now a float? So let's say you try A is now 20 point. Now I need to change it because it's now an integer, so I need to change this. So if you try to print this, I need to change this to float. So since we have float here, if I don't change this to float, and let's say I try to put something like this, I try to, let's say instead of float I put integer specifier. So if I put integer specifier, what's going to happen is going to print only this, and it's going to ignore the decimal, because this specifier is not for float, it's not for decimal, it's for integer, so it's going to ignore the decimal. So if you want to display the decimal, you have to use float, and that's why we have float specifier. So here I have to use float. So what I was trying to explain is here with this float is going to display all the decimal numbers, so you're going to have a very long numbers. But because this is float, it doesn't take more than six numbers correctly, decimal numbers. So it's going to display 6 decimal numbers correctly, but it's going to change this, so the value here can actually change. So I've explained that in my last video, the reason why it only accepts 6 numbers. But if I print something like this, I'm going to have hello, then I'm going to have a lot of numbers. So if you want to control this, you don't want to have a lot of numbers, then you have to indicate the number of decimal number you want. So this is how we do it. We use points, then we write the number of decimal we want, because this point actually means you want 2 decimal numbers, you want 2 numbers after the point, so it's going to give you 2 decimal numbers after point. So if you want 3, you can actually type 3, so it's going to give you 3. But you need to take note of this, we need to use dot. So we always use dot, which means we want 3 numbers after dot. That's what this means to compiler. So this is how this actually works, and this is how we control the number of float we want to display. So if you want to print anything, you need to indicate the data type. You need to tell compiler the kind of data you're trying to print, because you're trying to print a variable and there are different types of variable. So the compiler need to know, and this variable need to match. If it's wrong, it's going to give you error. Let's say this is A, and now I'm trying to use this. The compiler is going to give me an error. It's going to tell me that this is not a character, A is an integer, and the specifier does not match. This is how print function works. So the result of this is going to be hello, and then you're going to see 20, so it's going to be hello 20. So that's how print function works. So in my next video, I'm going to be talking about scan function. In my intermediate playlist, we're going to talk about many other functions, and we're going to write a program together and also a project. So please, this is very important, please like this video, subscribe to this channel. See you guys later.